audiences can expect just a great film. We're retelling a fantastic tale with wonderful music and adding to a technology that no one has ever seen before, no one has ever used before, and it's just exquisite.
It's the Popcorn Digest with Gareth and Andy. Popcorn Digest. Hello and welcome to Popcorn Digest, the podcast about the movies you love and some you don't. I'm your host Gareth Green, and joining me as always is my full-time co-host and part-time Disney heroine, Princess Andrew Phillips. I'm a positive role model. And for this week's episode, we're doing things a little differently here at Popcorn Digest, as we're joined by a third guest, friend of the show, Aidan Belizaire. Hello, Aidan.
Sorry, I was still laughing.
I waved into nothingness then as I did that, like, hello.
Do you trust me? Hello.
Hi.
Everyone.
Nice. Hello.
So, to the point.
Yeah. So Aidan is joining us for the first of our topic-based episodes as we're discussing Disney's live-action remakes, because who better to talk about these kids' films than three men in their mid-30s? So if any episode is going to get us added to some official watch list, it's definitely this one. But before we discuss all things Disney, it's time to roll the clips.
Well. I shall bestow a gift on the child.
Look at her. What if she is the one? The one who'll break the spell?
Hello.
You can talk.
Well, of course he can talk.
Hello. Pleased to meet you.
Oh, great one who summons me, I stand by my oath, loyalty to wishes 3. I'm kidding. Watch this. Watch out! You done wound me up. You ain't never had a friend like me. Life's not fair, is it, my little friend? While some are born to feast, others spend their lives in the dark.
Every family must contribute one man to fight.
You're a war hero. You've already made many great sacrifices.
If you saw Alice in Wonderland, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, The Jungle Book, Aladdin, The Lion King, Dumbo, Mulan, and Hercules and thought, I want to see those films, but with none of the charm, heart or talent, then boy have Disney got something for you. But are there diamonds in the rough of this bankrupt cinematic trend, or should we leave Disney to rot in the Shadowlands, picking over the bones of its predecessors? Well, that's what we're here to discuss today. And Andy, you picked this, the first of our topic-based episodes, so please tell us a little bit about why you've decided we can no longer go within 50 yards of a school anymore.
I think I decided to do these as, in terms of the business of movies, this is, I would say, probably one of the most transparent things I can think of in terms of making films purely for a monetary reason, because there is no artistic reason for any of these films to exist.
So needless to say, you're quite the fan.
Oh, I love them. They're amazing.
And Aidan, so we're bringing you along for the episode as well, because I know, having been friends with you for years, you're quite the fan of the original movies as well. I know we bonded because Aladdin was both our favourite movie of that era, of like the Disney Renaissance. So how do you feel coming to this topic? What's your experience bringing to the Disney live action remakes?
Kind of like a mild sense of despair, mixed in with questionable wonder. No, I don't know. I just sort of, at one side I see the point from a business point of view, but on the other side of it, it's so similar. They're so similar but without the heart, that it just doesn't make sense to me as a fan of the originals.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great topic to discuss as well, because we are currently in the midst of this trend. It's a trend that isn't going away anytime soon. We're going to be talking about in this episode, like, where this trend really began, what we're watching currently, and whether or not it actually works. Are they leaving any cultural impact? And we're also going to be discussing the future of Disney and what this means, because I do feel like this live action Disney remake epidemic, I'm going to call it, is something that's really indicative of where Disney is at as a company in terms of the quality that it's releasing, the type of film that it's releasing. And there's something sad about it to me that I've been wanting to speak about, really, looking for the avenue to speak about, because I'm talking about these films from the perspective of being a father. My daughter's currently at the age where she's watching a lot of these films and a lot of the originals as well. And I'm starting to see these films once more through her eyes and what these films mean for her and her future. So that's really what I want to discuss as well today for an episode. But I guess before we do actually get into things, it's time to really... We normally lay some context in for a film when we're discussing a film, but we can't really do that today. I'm going to lay some context about the trend and where this trend really began. And to be honest, you can look as far back and say Alice in Wonderland is where this began in 2010, but I think you can go further, back into the 90s when 101 Dalmatians came out, The Jungle Book came out, 102 Dalmatians, that type of thing. But it was more of a mid-budget, less successful version of this trend. Like, they made an attempt at it. Did any of you watch those films during the time?
Yeah, I saw 101 Dalmatians. Yeah, it's the Stephen Sommers Jungle Book from 1994, starring Jason Scott Lee.
No, I didn't even know. I've not seen that.
Yeah. Sam Neill's in it.
No, I had no idea. Dalmatians I watched and thought it was great.
Yeah, I loved Dalmatians when I was a kid.
Yeah, I remember when Dalmatians came out because it was everywhere. Like, you could not get away from it. It was like quite a big deal at the time because aside from the Jungle Book, that was the very first film they directly made, because Jungle Book's more of an adaptation of the book. It's not really it's not like a remake as such. So Dalmatians was the first where they actually bothered using elements of the original film in its production. And I remember it being everywhere and being pretty successful. And then they made the sequel and that kind of bombed.
It did, yeah. I mean, I remember the thing is about the 101 Dalmatians film is that I think it's quite successful in that Glenn Close role. That role is now synonymous with Glenn Close. I can't think of anybody else being Cruella de Vil except Glenn Close. I mean, I know they're attempting to remake it currently. They're doing the Cruella movie, or de Vil, or whatever it's called, with, is it Emma Stone?
Yeah.
Which I can't see in my head, but...
They've shot it as well, haven't they?
Have they?
It wrapped in, like, December or something. I was reading just before. So it's done. It's in the can.
It's in the can. I don't know if I want to go see or take my kids to see a film about the makings of a villain that wants to skin animals. Come on, kids. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah.
It's like bringing my kids to the cinema to go watch Cruella before we take them to the abattoir.
Some people can pull off that sort of very theatrical villain, and it just works. But other people, if they try and replicate a role, I don't know. I just feel like Emma Stone couldn't pull it off. The wackiness and how mental she is and what she actually wants to do, which is kill puppies.
Yeah, like I think that needs to work in that film because when you really strip it down, it is about a villain that wants to skin puppies. And, you know, you really have to play into the cartoony aspects of that character. But I don't think I want to see the Cruella movie. That doesn't appeal to me. What's the tagline going to be like? Before the puppies, there were the cats.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, the gerbils. Whatever she sellotaping a bird's wings together and throwing it off a roof. Like,
it sounds like a horror film.
I think the problem they've had, and they've not learnt by the failure of the sequel, the 102 Dalmatians, that there is only really one story that can be garnered out of that character.
Yeah.
Unless they do something completely different with her, which, to be honest, if you take that element out of the character, there's no character there. So
why make that film whatsoever if you take that element out?
You've basically just got to make 101 Dalmatians again for that idea to work. And they've already made... I mean, they're getting to the point now where they're actually remaking the live-action remakes anyway, so it's sort of folding back on itself. And
that's the future of this trend, is cannibalization. It's already at a point where they're already eating its legacy, essentially. And the future of it, if it continues, is just to go through the cycle once more. And that's something that I do want to get into later on in the episode. But also, as well, like we spoke about The Jungle Book, that also, Aidan, is not a film that I saw. I remember it being released, but what I remember most about it is that, like you say, it had Jason Scott Lee in it. And I remember Mowgli looked like he was about 29. Like this hench bodybuilder, like dangling from the trees.
He would have watched all his wolf friends die because they've got a shorter lifespan. So all of his family around him would have died, and him not knowing, just whimpering and howling. Andy Serkis did
A Mowgli.
His Jungle Book was based on the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the original animated Disney film,
It's very loosely based.
okay.
Whereas some of the other ones, like Mowgli and everything, are much more like faithful to the books.
I know we're going to be discussing the Jungle Book, the Jon Favreau version, in this episode, but I do think that Mowgli, the Andy Serkis version, is definitely primed for an episode as well. Because have you seen some of the CGI in that film?
Yeah.
Like, it's not so much the quality of the CGI, but that they've decided to go for this like human-animal hybrid, almost like in the same way as Cats for all of the characters. Like the Christian Bale, does he play the Panther, Bagheera? Something like that. And it kind of looks like him as well. And it's like, ugh.
And there's the Cockney. Is it the wolves? The bad wolf pack in his film. They're all Cockney. If I remember well, or maybe I'm just thinking of orcs from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, right.
I always
It's got
got them
that,
mixed
that
up.
type of feeling to it. Yeah.
Meat's back on the menu, boys.
You know what? The thing is about that scene, the meat's back on the menu boys scene in Lord of the Rings, is that it implies that the orcs are very much aware of what a restaurant is. And that they have their own little orc takeaways.
Potato waffle and a smalling leg. Not smalling, halfling. Oh, man. Messed that one up.
The halfling combo box.
Thighs and breasts for me. Bucket full of hobbit breasts.
Oh my god, that's great.
Anyway.
Okay, so let's leave that conversation behind, this very dark conversation about hobbit breasts, and let's move on to where this trend really started to kick up a notch in terms of the Disney live-action remakes. So I think I would say that it actually began with Alice in Wonderland, the Tim Burton live-action remake. And that film, despite being something of a critical failure, was a huge success. It was made for $200 million, and it made $1 billion at the box office. Back, I would say, at the tail end of when making $1 billion at the box office really meant something. It doesn't so much anymore. That's just the standard that you have to stick to now.
I think it was greatly helped by the 3D trend at the time because they rode that crest of the wave.
That's right, yeah. Post-Avatar 3D, yeah.
I'd say 2010 to 13 were probably the golden years for that.
The golden
yeah.
shower of 3D.
The golden shower, yeah.
Was it in IMAX?
It was, yeah. It was in IMAX. I didn't actually see it. I caught the last 45 minutes on television a few Christmases ago, and it's one of the most dross-looking Disney films I've ever seen, and in a way seems to have set the template for future Disney live-action remakes. It's just so lifeless and flaccid.
Yeah.
This is what I think about it, and that is nothing. I've seen it, and honestly, I can't remember almost all of it. I do remember his makeup was just... his eyes, whatever the contact lens they had on Johnny Depp's eyes.
I think that was cocaine.
Just a drop of LSD. Let's get them pupils nice and big and deep. I can't remember much else about it. Was there a smoking caterpillar in it?
Yeah.
Still, there must have
Yeah,
been.
that's in the original.
Alan Rickman.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
What, Alan Rickman was in the Johnny Depp version?
No, he was smoking a caterpillar.
Guys, come on. Don't fuck with me on this one.
Yeah, he plays the caterpillar in it. And unfortunately, in the sequel, that role is his final ever film role.
Is it?
Oh,
wow.
Dear God, no. Oh, that's really sad.
Where he plays a fucking butterfly.
Oh, that's really quite sad. What a way to end a legacy.
Fucking Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, so that's Alice in Wonderland. That's where it all really kicked off. And then from that as well, I have a list of films that followed. And with that film making the money that it did, as mentioned, $200 million budget, and made $1 billion worldwide. Off the back of that, we went into films like Maleficent, Cinderella, then The Jungle Book really took it the next notch again. We had Beauty and the Beast, Dumbo, Aladdin, Lion King, and the Maleficent sequel. Now, I will say that we've got to the point now where last year, 2019, that culminated in 3 of these releases, 3 of these live-action Disney movies. Like, that's all they were making. I know they've got the whole Marvel thing and Lucasfilm, but as a Disney, as a production company, all they're making live-action-wise is Dumbo, Aladdin, Lion King, and the Maleficent sequel. That is really essentially where their business is currently.
And it's 5 if you count the Lady and the Tramp from Disney Plus.
Exactly, yeah, which is a film I have actually seen. I watched it not too long ago.
Yeah, so have I.
Yeah. So that's really like sets us up to where we are currently. And I want to start the episode off on a positive note. I'm going to throw a question out. Are there any of the Disney live action remakes that you like? Or what are the positive aspects? I can see you laughing already, Andy. And what are the positive aspects that you can take away from these movies, if any?
I liked Luke Evans as Gaston in Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, he's actually surprisingly great in that film.
I mean, to be honest, I thought the pairing of him and Josh Gad were probably the only successful things in that film. And Will Smith as the genie in Aladdin was okay.
I agree.
I wouldn't say it was great, but it was okay. It was better than I was expecting, and he's the only sort of saving grace of that film.
On that, Robin Williams is my, if not one of, he's my favourite actor of all time, personally.
Yeah.
And that role is just, he brings so much to me, to the original role, from all the celebrity impressions to just the energy and the way he manipulates his voice, and he's just incredible to me. Will Smith having to follow that, hats off, because that's one of Robin Williams' most famous roles.
Yeah, it's an impossible task.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought Will Smith did a brilliant job. Not necessarily just being the genie, but a brilliant job in having to follow up on something spectacular. Yeah. So I agree with you on that. I think he was the best part of the film of Aladdin. Still not great, but definitely I think he did a good job, because I'm sure so many people were watching that film to watch that performance.
Yeah. And to be honest, a lot of people had their knives sharpened for that particular role as well. And who can blame them? Because as you mentioned, Robin Williams, especially for our generation, we grew up with him as a filmmaker. I've already spoke about him on a previous episode, Toys. That was more in a negative way. But these films like Ferngully and Aladdin and, well, I mean, you look at the films he made as well, even like Jumanji and Hook. They may not be the most successful films quality-wise, but these are the films that we grew up with, and Robin Williams made those films. And I couldn't imagine anybody else in the role of the genie that works because of Robin Williams. And it seems to have been tailor-made to Robin Williams' stand-up performance anyway. Like they'd tried to embody that in the character from the very beginning. And everybody had their knife sharpened for Will Smith. And I would say that actually he filled the shoes quite well, but more so when he was allowed to be Will Smith.
Yeah.
Rather than
definitely
Robin Williams. Like, there are moments where they keep on bringing it back to that original performance because we're expecting it to hit similar beats. But when they're allowed Will Smith to be Will Smith and be kind of like charming and affable in the way that he is, that character comes to life in a way that it, like, I didn't have it pegged to. I wasn't sure that was going to happen. I actually walked away from that film saying that Will Smith was one of the best aspects of it. And I didn't think that was going to work from the outset.
Yeah.
Not to say that I think that it's a great performance. Not to say that it is even his best performance.
No.
But just in terms of living up to something, he successfully made me forget the Robin Williams character a couple of times throughout that film, and that in itself is a success.
Yeah. I think from a technical aspect as well, I thought it worked the best when he was just in his human form. I think anytime they tried the weird mocap CG blue version of Will Smith, the limitations...
Yeah, with his floaty face on Arnold Schwarzenegger's avatar body.
Yeah. I think the limitations of the remakes are very apparent there and then in terms of the strivings to make something live action. It's, for some weird reason, an ambition to be legitimate with these films for some bizarre reason. And you get the same thing with comic book movies, because I still think that Into the Spider-Verse is probably one of the best comic book movies that's ever been made.
Hands down, yeah.
And I think that's down to the fact that it's animated and uses the format well, and the format translates the form of the comic much better than a live action movie ever could. But there's still this kind of belief that it's not a proper Spider-Man movie because it's not a live-action movie. Mm-hmm. It's just a spin-off. You know, it's that thing in the background. And Spider-Man Far From Home is the real Spider-Man movie because it's in the MCU and everything. So there's still always that kind of stigma attached to films that aren't made in live action. But I think these films prove that the other way around, that in a lot of cases, live action can be very inferior to other forms when it comes to telling certain stories.
Yeah, and incredibly restrictive, I would say, as well, when you start to compare what they're doing with the live action films to what they did with the animated films. And I always subscribe to the Brad Bird way of thinking, and that is that animation is not a genre. Animation is a medium.
Yeah.
There are many genres within that, but it's people treat it like it's a genre all of its own. And as you mentioned, there's a stigma that is brought to it as a result of that really shouldn't exist. It's just a way of telling these stories. And some things absolutely excel in that medium.
Yeah.
I would actually say as well, I want to, talking about the positive aspects of these live action remakes, one of them that I did watch most of in the build up to this episode was Maleficent, and I don't like it. I don't like the film. It's not for me. I like the character Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty. I think it's one of the best designed characters in terms of the Disney villains, and I would say that that film probably robs her of her villainy in many ways. But also, on the other side of things, I feel like from the perspective I'm at with the Disney live action films we're getting now, that I still want to applaud it for trying to do something completely different with an established character. It actually sticks out as a film that tries in a trend that is known for not trying. And in a way, I want to applaud Maleficent for that, even though it's not a film that works for me. I know it works for many other people, but it doesn't work for me. And I would say that in terms of the remakes, there's one film in the lot that I think actually does work perfectly. And it's not really strictly a live-action remake, but it's a remake of a film that was only partially animated, and that is Pete's Dragon. Did anybody see that?
No, I don't think anyone saw Pete's Dragon, to be honest.
Well, exactly. So it's a David Lowery directed film. So he's known for the indie darling for The Old Man and the Gun and Ghost Story as well. And he did this Pete's Dragon live-action remake for $65 million, so it's really a low budget when compared to these other $200 million plus budgeted films. And I think that low budget really allowed him the freedom to do something different with existing material, and it allowed him to really cut out a lot of the chaff that in a larger budgeted film he would have had to include because it was nostalgic. Even if it didn't work, because it was based on that nostalgia that we bring to these films, he would have been forced into bringing that along. Because I think Pete's Dragon is a film that I grew up with it, but I don't think it works. I think it has its moments, but it's very, very up and down all the way through. It's very uneven.
Doesn't that nostalgia almost work against a lot of these live-action remakes, especially for those of us who are older and grew up with and have a very strong fondness of the original ones? It can heavily, heavily taint our viewership, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely, yeah. I feel like it's a double-edged sword when it comes to nostalgia as well, is that you've got these studio heads that are telling the directors and the writers that they have to make these films, that they have to hit these beats as well because this is what the audience expects. But from our perspective, it's like experiencing something that we've already been through. It's a poor imitation. And I always think at the end of it, why would I ever watch that film again when I have the original there if it's just going to be hitting the same nostalgic beats? But at the same time, nostalgia is king in cinema at the moment. There's no escaping it. For the last, I would say, 10, maybe 15 years, we've just been building to this nostalgic peak that I think the bottom's got to fall out of sooner or later, really.
Yeah.
A positive aspect for me, especially with The Lion King, and I don't think anyone can argue this. If you argue this, then you're blind. And that's the visuals. The visuals are stunning to me.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that they can't express themselves is a big failure for me. But if they were making something live action where a lion doesn't need to smile, a lion can be a lion, for example. I mean, there's a shot at the beginning of it where there's a little bush rat or a little mouse thing. Mm-hmm. It's running along, and I watched it a few times. I was like, just look at the way its ears are flicking and it's smelling, and an ear flicks and moves this way, and its tail. It's just incredible. It is incredible what they've managed to do with that. That's certainly one of the positives of these films, especially making these animals live action. And maybe it's too good, and maybe that almost brings it back around to a negative point.
Yeah, I think with that, I really appreciate the technology that's gone into the figures, and I would emphasize the figures rather than the backgrounds, because the backgrounds are live action. But I just wish all that energy and money had been used on something new rather than something where it was never going to be suited to that format, because The Lion King, that aside, probably one of the worst films I've ever seen in my entire life. I thought it was absolutely abysmal. I actually had to turn it off halfway through.
Oh, wow.
It was aggressively dull and boring.
Yeah, I mean, how could they do that to Kimber the White Lion?
Yeah. And I just got the sense that outside of the animators who were doing the creatures, no one was trying. Whoever filmed it was lazy as fuck. The shot compositions is, despite it looking pristine, is pretty terrible. The voice acting's very questionable. The pacing's just gone. And the staging for any of the musical numbers is non-existent. Like, I Just Can't Wait to Be King is absolutely shocking. Even when you take out these sort of abstract visuals from the original, the actual general staging and editing in those musical numbers is non-existent.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's on autopilot.
I would say as well, like, on your point, to kind of meet both points here, is that one of the things that I came out of The Lion King saying when I went to go see it, I took my daughter to go see it, and to be honest, she wasn't that interested in the film. She's watched the original so many times, but she wasn't that interested in this version of the film. And she didn't get upset in the parts that I thought she would get upset, the parts that upset her at home watching the original. It was just kind of an experience that she went through and then never really revisited it again. But I would say that it's a technical exercise more than it is a movie. And technically, in terms of the visual effects and the believability of the way that these creatures look, and as you mentioned, like the close-ups of the fauna, the close-ups of the little critters, the little animals, and the lions themselves, it's unquestionably amazing. It's unquestionably brilliant. And I agree with you, Andy, that I just kind of wish that all of that energy had just been channeled into a brand new experience for everybody. Because, and I think this is a problem with these type of films, is that when somebody asks now, or especially when my daughter asks, Dad, will you put on The Lion King? I know instinctually that she's not referring to the live action remake. And that's the kind of issue with these, is that when people ask to put on Aladdin, when people ask to put on The Lion King, nobody's ever going to be talking about these remakes.
No.
They just exist. They're a technical exercise. They're kind of like a retread, but they're leaving no real cultural impact, I would say.
I feel they've almost gone down kind of like a DreamWorks path in a way. Perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but Pixar always seemed to me that they got the best voice for the role. And DreamWorks always seemed to get the biggest name for the role, whether or not they were the best voice for the role, right? And I remember watching the trailer for The Lion King, the remake, and at the end it does a ba-dum-dum-dum-da-da-da, and on every beat it's another big name actor, and I think it's 2 full screens worth of named actors.
Yeah.
Is that just to make sales better? Is that what they're taking that from the DreamWorks model for? I mean, they own Pixar as well, right? Why would they not just take notes from those critically acclaimed films that Pixar are creating?
Yeah, it's regressive, isn't it, really? It's like they're going back to doing something that the competitor was known for doing and was often criticised for. You know what? I'd never made that parallel that it's more like DreamWorks now, but it not good DreamWorks, but very bad DreamWorks. This is like Shrek the third.
Shrek 4.
I think this is down to the fact that these are handled by the live action section of Disney Studios, whereas the umbrella of Walt Disney Animation, Pixar, and Blue Sky now are their own thing. And they are managed by a whole separate bunch of people. Like, I think at the moment it's like Jennifer Lee, Clark Spence, something like that, and Pete Docter. So they oversee the animation, which, to be honest, I would say is probably the only department that's actually taking any risks these days in Disney.
Yeah.
Because they're actually making original films still.
I had a point on, guys, you were saying about your daughter watching maybe some of these live action remakes for the first time, perhaps, over the original animation. Just randomly, well, you both know this, but for the listeners, I guess, one of my favourite films of all time is Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
And I've never seen the original version of that film. I know it's a musical, and I love the musical, and I've seen it many times live, with a very, very drastic and different ending, let me tell you that.
Yeah.
And I've never seen the original film version, the one from the 60s or something.
Yeah, the Roger Corman version.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Okay, well, I've never seen that, but I've seen over 100 times, because I used to watch it at my dad's house when I visited him on weekends, and that film, that's the first time I saw that, so I had no reference to the original, if you know what I mean. And I love that film.
Yeah.
I really do love it. So I imagine that there's going to be people like me with regards to these live-action remakes, right, who have no reference of what's come before, but they do now build a strong connection to this film, having seen it for the first time. And then those people, like if I watched the original Little Shop of Horrors, would that taint something that I've fallen in love with now? You get what I mean? It's an interesting way to think about it.
I understand, but having seen the original Little Shop of Horrors as well, I would say that the thing about remaking that and doing it as a musical is that the musical version of Little Shop of Horrors improves on the original in every way possible. The original film is one that was shot in about 3 days.
Yeah. Oh, right.
It's shot in a very limited window. Like, I remember finding out that it was shot in over a week on weekdays. And that was it, really. I would say that the musical improves on that in every single way. And I would say that if you are going to do remakes of films, you need to pick a film that, one, needs to be improved, and you also need to be doing it in a completely different way as well, like, to justify its existence. And Little Shop of Horrors, the version you're referring to, the musical, is exactly the type of remake that we should be making if we are making remakes at all.
Yeah. They just took something that had a kernel of a good idea, but the actual film was not particularly great, and made something out of it. I mean, probably another great example of a remake like that works is The Fly.
Oh, yeah.
Where obviously the original execution of it is very kooky, with the fly man, and then obviously David Cronenberg was able to make a supremely terrifying body horror with lots of different themes and all sorts of subtext going on.
One that includes Jeff Goldblum's dick in a jar.
Yeah.
Nobody asked him to.
He just brought it to set and just said,
"It's my dick in a jar."
My dick in a jar, girl. But I think that's where the comparison, that you can maybe turn it on its head, because that is where they've taken something and made it much better, whereas they've taken things which are very iconic things and made very often mediocre products out of it. And going back to your daughter, like Gaz, when she wants to watch The Lion King, she's going to immediately say the animated version, because there's nothing to latch onto on that remake. I mean, I was just thinking from a marketing point of view, there's nothing to garner out of that because of the way that they've done it. Mm-hmm. You cannot market photorealistic lions because you're just selling lions.
Yeah.
You can't market Simba from the 2019 version because you're just selling a plush toy of just a lion.
Yeah.
You can't market anything.
This is Simba. He's so unique looking. He doesn't look like any other lion.
And that's the thing, that these films have an incredibly limited shelf life, because I know for a fact, even though the movie made like $1.6 billion, the soundtrack didn't sell.
Yeah.
Everyone just bought the old one.
That was a massive disappointment as well for me, was the soundtrack.
Yeah.
I know that they were bringing Hans Zimmer back, but it felt like the retooling of his own work was far inferior as well. Some of the best cues were just, I don't know if it was to do with the mixing, but some of the bits I was waiting to listen for were like mixed lower in a track that included more noisy elements as well. And it just kind of lost me.
Another problem with that is that, sort of harking back to the point I made earlier, is that when they sing Can You Feel the Love Tonight, I didn't hear Nala, I heard Beyonce.
Yeah.
And all that. Obviously, she's way better than that.
Yeah. But, is that Beyonce on the podcast? Special guest, Beyonce!
or is it Nala?
Yeah, oh, fuck. Hello! That was my impression of a lion.
Wow.
Thank you.
No.
It sounded like Mongo from Blazing Saddles.
I know that Elton John does not like the new version of the movie
the way that you said
first name terms.
Oh yeah, my mate Elton.
Me and EJ. He's got some thoughts on it.
Did anybody hear that coronavirus Elton John live?
Oh no.
I'm still standing.
Oh, dude,
I'm still standing.
Nope, but I'm going to look at it straight away.
It's absolutely brilliant, mate. You need to see the version where somebody's added lyrics as to what he's actually saying. Back up on the piss end of my life.
Yeah, it's like he forgot to put his teeth in before doing the show. It's like,
that can just sort of boil up the anger inside a little bit as well, because like I was watching Hakuna Matata.
Yeah.
Well, I watched the whole film, and when Hakuna Matata came on, there's just this one bit that the original singer does, and he harmonizes with one particular note, and I always just love that. I just love that. I used to love singing it and listening to it. Oh, it's where he goes, Hakuna, Hakuna, ha, ha, ha.
Do you know who that is?
Who is it?
The guy who did the singing voice of Simba in the original is Joseph Williams. Now, he was the lead singer of Toto in the late 80s, but he's also the son of John Williams.
Oh, really?
What?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Well, he does this brilliant part where he does that sort of trill and that laugh, and it's just, I don't know, it's just fantastic. And although I didn't think Donald Glover did a bad rendition, it was a different rendition, but it just missed that one bit for me. And it sounds almost borderline pedantic, really, but just it was enough to affect it for me.
Yeah.
But that's the film on that level as well, watching it, and especially because you have that frame of reference in mind constantly throughout. It's like watching a amateur production of a play.
Yeah.
And I mean, not to say, I think there are some absolutely fantastic amateur productions as well out there, but it's like a version of it that's something's always off. There's always something taking you out. And I think the inherent realism of it is always taking you out as well. Like, it really culminates with that "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" as well, because by the end of that song, it's like, when you see "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" in the original, you're like, yes, I can feel the love. There's a lot of love right here. There's a lot of, look at this. Look at what's happening on screen. There's so much colour. There's so much energy. And in this one, it's like, "Can you feel the love?" By the end of the song, I'm like, I want to die.
Yeah.
I am so insanely bored. I'm experiencing an existential crisis watching this, especially because it's in the fucking daytime.
Yeah.
Can you feel the love tonight?
The photorealism, I was half expecting Simba's lipstick to pop out. Just, I mean, how real do they want to go? Like,
full-on adult version. But the thing I really wanted to touch on with all of these films, and especially the ones based on the Renaissance films, I just find it incredibly disrespectful to every single human being that worked on those original films and made them what they were, because the blood, sweat and tears to get something like The Lion King as it was in the original is unprecedented. And using that "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" as an example, in the original reel of the film, that song is sung entirely by Timon and Pumbaa, and they wanted to do it almost like an ironic love song. And it got to the point where they did a screening and Elton John was there, and he actually was seething. He was like, "You've ruined the movie by doing this." And they had to sort of quickly scramble and change it. And obviously they reached a compromise by having Timon and Pumbaa sing the start of the song. I know Aladdin, halfway through production, they had to throw out the whole story and start again.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't working. Like, there's a whole thing with that Howard Ashman wrote, which had Aladdin as part of a street gang, and his mother was a main character, and they cut all that out, and they actually had to throw out half of Howard Ashman's songs, which is why Tim Rice was brought in to sort of finish it, because Howard had already passed away by the time they got to retooling the film.
Right, yeah.
I listened to the song about his mother. I think it's on one of the extras on the DVD, on the Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful track.
Yeah, but they had to ditch it because the rest of the film wasn't working as a whole. And that's the kind of blood, sweat and tears. These films are really hard to make, and also the fact that at the time they had to make the films very short because of the time-consuming work that was put into them. So you have to have narrative shorthand. Every single word counts. Every single visual counts. And I feel the level of disrespect by these lazy fucking directors is if you've written a really good essay and then somebody nicks it and then decides, I'm going to do the same thing, but all I'm going to do is just change the words, but the words aren't as good.
Yeah, it's like going through a thesaurus for every single word, and because they've changed every word, it no longer makes sense.
Yeah. Like, for example, on The Lion King, I did watch bits of it afterwards, but like the end credits on the crawl, it just says, "Thanks to the original creators of The Lion King, Roger Allers, Rob Minkoff and Brenda Chapman." Yeah. It's like a tiny little reference to the original film and everyone else involved.
I would say as well, like, to go to another film as well, like what they did with Aladdin. I know that there's a massive controversy with the writer of that film. It was Ted Elliott, I think I was reading online. I was saying that when the trailer was released, it included dialogue that he had written, the information about, you know, the diamond and the rough and all of that, and even a melody that he had wrote as well. And they didn't get any money for it. They didn't even get a reach out from Disney to ask them for permission to use their material or anything like that. But he said it's not that we expected that because it doesn't belong to us, but we expected a representative to at least approach us and say, we're going to remake Aladdin and we want to make you aware of that, given that you were crucial to that original film. And they didn't get invited to even the premiere of the film. And it's like, that's the way you're treating essentially the source material, is that you're essentially just brushing it under the carpet as well.
That's horrible, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably give like X amount of free tickets out, or each actor has X amount to give to their friends and stuff like that, and competition winners and stuff, and they can't even honour the people who created the original, and the only reason that film's there is because of those people.
Will Smith could have brought his fucking dog.
You know, in the future, and this is gonna kill you, but there'll be someone who watches the animated version of Aladdin, And they're like, oh, yeah, it was all right, but I prefer the one where the genie raps. And like, we're going to die on the inside that day. And that is going to happen.
Talking about Aladdin as well, because I would say that of the original films, Aladdin was the film that I always responded to the most. I don't have as strong as or as visceral as a reaction as you do, Andy, to the Lion King remake, because I was never the biggest fan of the Lion King to begin with. It was Aladdin that was the film that I was always fond of when I was a kid, and the remake was one that I had my knives sharpened for. And when it came out and it was released, I was just like, yeah, it was fine. It was fine. It did what it did, and then it's over. It had that kind of effect on me. And I think the more that I've seen it now, because my daughter's watched it a couple of times as well, I'd say the more that it's grated against me now, how little energy and... Like, it's a very colourful film. I like that it's got colour in it, but it feels like, especially for a Guy Ritchie film, I quite like Guy Ritchie films. They're okay. He makes very silly dad movies. And even his worst films have, like Revolver, have this kind of like wild, unpredictable energy to the filmmaking. And it's like, I like that about him. And this film has none of that. Aladdin has zero of that. I don't know why you would get Guy Ritchie and then just kind of like...
chop his balls off.
Yeah, exactly. He's clearly not a guy as well that's comfortable with musical numbers, because the musical numbers are so slow in terms of the blocking and the movement of the characters. Like they're supposed to be like jumping over the rooftops as they're singing and stuff like that, but because they've got all of this song to deliver, like say for example they're walking from one side of a courtyard to the other, rather than doing it while they're running, because they know that they've only got this little space to deliver all of this dialogue in. They've got to move much slower. So everybody's moving much slower around them, and it makes everything feel sluggish.
I'm kind of like in between you two in the way that my two favourites were both, and equally, The Lion King and Aladdin. I actually thought in Aladdin himself was weak. He was the weakest character, and I actually thought Jasmine was bumped up a little bit. She had more to say, and she had a little bit more to her than in the animated film.
I would say they actually made Aladdin quite a lot stupider in the remake. Like, he's kind of a dumb idiot in the remake. It's kind of like a very bad example of PC filmmaking where they build up the part. The thing I have a problem with, when they make strong female characters or strong ethnic characters, they never give them any flaws. So they're not actually that strong as a character. They're just empowered, but they're not actually very interesting.
Yeah,
they're almost like scared of giving them any flaws because they're scared of like any kind of backlash that people might have. It's like the movie felt like it was in a vice a lot of the time.
It's what you would refer to as like marketable progression. It's like, because I believe that, you know, films have to be progressive. They have to move forward. We have to include more minorities in our films. We have to include more roles and more interesting roles for women. But this is like performative. I think somebody referred to it as performative wokeism. And that's what it feels like to me. It's like, how can we do this in a way that we can market as progressive without actually strictly being so?
Yeah.
It's like, it's how can we have the appearance of taking the next step without actually doing so? And that's what these films embody for me. It's like, how can we use this in a way to just market it to kids as well?
Because I never thought it was more prominent than in the characterization of Jafar and the Sultan, because they were both boring as fuck. Jafar was a complete non-entity in the film. If you think the Sultan and Aladdin, I mean, even though he's basically sort of a man baby in the animated version, you instantly remember
he totally is.
like how the Sultan looks like and how he moves and everything. And the same goes for Jafar. But with this film, they've gone so far in the other direction that, I mean, to be honest, I would say, with the exception of Luke Evans as Gaston, I just thought all the villains in these remakes were done the dirty. Like Chiwetel Ejiofor as Scar in Lion King was absolute bollocks.
Oh, be prepared. I was so disappointed.
But they pitched his voice far too similarly to James Earl Jones. And because they didn't look that dissimilar to each other, I was starting to get confused as to who was talking, because there was very little distinction between the two voices. And also, the other thing I was thinking of that the animated films did really well and they could sort of get away with it. On the odd occasion, what they would do is, if they liked someone who had a good voice for the speaking part, but then they didn't feel that the actor could perform the songs well, what they would do, they would get another person in to actually sing the songs in the similar style. So, for example, in the original Lion King, Be Prepared is only half performed by Jeremy Irons. The bits where he's singing are actually performed by Jim Cummings. doing an impression of Jeremy Irons.
Man, Jim Cummings gets everywhere, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah, he does. Yeah,
a Disney mainstay.
He
Just
is,
in terms of voice acting in general, I forgot what I was watching the other day, and I instantly heard his voice and was like, that's Jim Cummings right there.
Yeah. And they seem to have not done that with any of these remakes. They've just got actors in who are well known. Like Seth Rogen singing Hakuna Matata is fucking atrocious.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he cannot sing.
No.
He cannot sing.
He can laugh, though, man. His laugh's great.
He sounds fat.
Yeah.
So he works for Pumbaa.
Yeah.
But I think that's where they've missed the point of how they created these original films, because especially in the early period of Renaissance when they were making these Broadway-style musicals, when they were casting these films, so like Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, to a lesser extent Aladdin and Lion King, but especially those first three, they cast them as Broadway musicals.
Yeah.
So if I named the actors who played all these iconic Disney animated characters, like for example, if I mentioned that Richard White played Gaston, you'd be like, who the fuck's Richard White? And, Paige O'Hara played Belle.
I remember watching the DVD extras of my old Aladdin DVD. They had a bit where the singers were coming in to perform A Whole New World.
Yeah.
And they were different, I guess, to the actor and the actresses who played the speaking roles, like you said. And it was some guy, some like short guy, who came in wearing a baseball cap and a hoodie. Yeah. And then he opens his mouth, and what I remember, that beautiful voice pops out. And I'm looking at him thinking, wow, just
where did that come from?
Yeah. I was crushed. I was like, you sound so beautiful. And I mean, I'm straight, but I was like, he sounds so beautiful, but looks like he's just walked off the street and been like, yeah, I can sing for a fiver, mate. Let me have a bash. I was so shocked that this beautiful noise came out of this street rap.
Yeah.
Street rap.
Talking about singing, Be Prepared is half singing, half speak. Fuck off, just sing it. Or speak it.
Yeah.
That was one of the worst parts of that film for me. Because it's just so anticlimactic, and I was waiting for this good, strong performance and the hyenas to be the militant sort of marching that they do, all in unison, and just... Again, maybe I'm just comparing it too much, but that song just wasn't a song, it was a speech with added fuck.
But that's it. It's because they've gone down the whole realism aspect that they can't have these like over-the-top figurative symbolic scenes where you have hyenas like Nazis goose-stepping down the fucking canyon. And it's like you can't include that because they've dedicated themselves to this kind of planet Earth type realism.
Yeah.
And it ends up cutting the balls off the film anyway. Ends up cutting out what I enjoyed about it to begin with.
Yeah. But going back to the casting, like Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, they are Broadway musicals done in animated form. Therefore, I want a Broadway quality cast to bring that off. I do not want to see Emma Watson struggle to sing Belle.
Yeah.
Sounds like Cats all over again.
It does. Yeah, it's got that feeling to it, hasn't it?
And it's like, I don't care if they're famous. I just want them to sing the fucking song well. Like, it's a musical. If they can't sing, then it doesn't work.
There was another issue that I had going off singing that I had with Aladdin, and somebody pointed it out to me, and then once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Like when he's running around Agrabah, and it's animated, and he looks dirty, and he skids, and dust flies up, and it looks dusty.
Yeah.
And then when you watch the film, the live-action film, just look at their clothes and look at the set. It's pristine. It's like clean, and it doesn't look lived in. And he might have a patch on his pants or something like that, but it's so studio. Like that attention to sort of detail there hasn't happened when there's somebody dedicated to it. Whereas an animator would have to almost think for themselves to make something like that, to settle them into that world that they've created out of the pen.
No, I agree. I think there's a complete... I mean, not to say, speaking about these films anyway, that realism is the way forward, but I also think that there's a lack of texture to the imagery that we definitely see in Aladdin as well. But yeah, like you say, I think that film as well, it does feel very soundstagey from the beginning, and I know that there's a huge controversy surrounding that film in regards to the actors that they cast for extras, because it was shot in England, and they wanted it to be authentically cast in terms of like Indian actors portraying Indian roles, and all the more power to them. That's a fantastic idea. That is exactly how they should be going forward. But then they absolutely shoot themselves in the foot by casting white people as extras and then bronzing them up, giving them a bit of blackface. And I watched the film just the other day. I watched the first hour of it. I will say I watched about for this episode, I only watched like the first hour of about 4 different films. I never saw it all the way through. And Aladdin was one of them. And during that opening set piece, if you look hard enough at the extras, you can see the ones that have been bronzed up. You can see the ones that are wearing the Indian blackface and brownface. And it's clear as day once you start to notice it.
Well, at least they didn't cast Jake Gyllenhaal as the Prince of Persia. I mean, that would have been a hard one to brown up.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, but it's okay because he has an English accent.
The musical numbers emphasize it more, but the differences in the mediums really speak out because, like, for example, if you watch One Jump in the original film, it's choreographed within an inch of its life. The camera's moving, the shots are just going like that, the backgrounds are changing, everything's moving so fast because those films are boarded.
They're edited in pre-production.
Yeah, they are. They do not proceed with any animation before the story reel is signed off. And when they look at these films, they are just looking at hundreds and hundreds of storyboards, and the film is just gets reboarded and reboarded until that everyone's happy, and then they start with the animation. Because it's been boarded like that, every single second counts because you can't waste much with animation because it takes such a fucking long time to do that if someone's been assigned a shot, they know that that is going in the film because there's nothing on the cutting room floor other than the boarded reels. And that's why the films zip along so efficiently in the ways that the live action films can only dream of because they've not spent anywhere near the same amount of time on them.
Yeah, it reminds me of that story about Michael Eisner with the Black Cauldron, or was it Jeffrey Katzenberg?
Jeffrey Katzenberg, yeah.
He saw that film and said, right, you've got to edit 20 minutes out of it. And the animation crew went, what do you mean edit 20 minutes out of it? The editing's done. We are animating the film now. This is it. The film that you're watching is it. He's like, no, you've got to find a way to edit 20 minutes out of this film. And that film suffers as well because you can obviously see that there are whole chunks just simply taken out wholesale. And it does remind me of this idea of people that don't really know the medium bringing this different mentality to it. Like, as you say, it's people that are so used to dealing with live action that are now imposing that on another medium entirely. And with these live action remakes, I get a feeling of that as well. Like, it's somebody that doesn't really understand that original medium coming in and saying, well, here's us cutting 20 minutes out or adding 20 minutes on as if it's going to improve the piece.
Yeah. I did a bit of research on this because I did find the remakes unnecessarily long. And I don't know why they're long because even on a business mind, if you'd made a 90-minute film, you can have more screenings in a day.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why these films are like 2 hours. So I did some research and looked into how long the original version of the film was, and this is without credits versus the remake. So I did it on the 3 that I watched because I've just watched the 3 Renaissance remakes. So the original Lion King tells its story in 83.5 minutes, and that's without credits. So that's just the actual animation. The 2019 Lion King tells its story in 107.5 minutes.
Yeah, so it's
right?
like...
Oh, wow.
And I don't include credits because the credits for The Lion King are about 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
The original Aladdin tells its story in 86 minutes. 2019 Aladdin tells its story in 119.5 minutes.
Wow, I didn't think there was that much added.
Yeah. Original Beauty and the Beast tells its story in 80.5 minutes. And the 2017 Beauty and the Beast tells its story in 118.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're essentially the same story. I mean, with all those 3 films, there are very few added scenes. I think The Lion King is probably the worst offender for that because I don't think there are pretty much any added scenes in the film.
No.
It just takes twice as long to tell every single fucking scene. So when they got to I Just Can't Wait to Be King, I'm like, fucking hell, this has been going on forever. It's just so slow.
Did they not add in Morning Report?
No, because...
No, they didn't, did they?
And that's going off the theatricals because I know like in the late 90s, early 2000s, they started doing those special editions where they kept putting in songs, which again was a problem because they cut those songs out for a good reason. Like in the Beast, there's that Human Again song, which they'd written and recorded for the film and rightly cut it out because it doesn't take the story forward. All it's saying is that the household objects are just wishing that they were fucking human again. And it lasts 5 minutes. And that's a great example of them cutting something because it doesn't serve the story in an efficient way.
So there's elements like that when you can see how these things are put together and how actually a lot of the time less is more. And the remakes are so excessive in the way that they tell their story that it inherently weakens things. And also the main thing I had a problem with is in the Aladdin one especially, them swapping story elements around that actually create more problems than they solve. The fact that they introduced Jasmine so early on in the film to the point where they kind of know that one's not a prince and one's not a peasant, that they have to actually magically make everyone think that Aladdin is Prince Ali when that is not an issue in the original version of the film. So they have to create things to solve issues that they've created by moving things around in the story. I think Beauty and the Beast has the similar issue with the whole issue with the household objects being turned permanently into the objects when the rose dies at the end. And they have that horribly depressing ending in the live action one where all the household objects basically die. I wrote in my notes, everybody dies at the end of the film. And it makes the story not work because there's that great Lindsay Ellis documentary, the Thanks I Hate It, where she goes heavily into the Beauty and the Beast and all the changes that they made that actually make the story worse.
Yeah. And she said as well, like, one of the things that she mentions is it's also appease, like, the cinema sins culture that we are in now. Like, we've got to have these scenes because somebody's counter somewhere on some YouTube video is going to ding, which is just the wrong reason to include those story beats because you're just going to end up creating more problems for yourself. Because it kind of posits an idea where the local village has actually been under a spell this whole time also because the staff of the house that have been turned into household objects are actually relatives of the people of the village, but they can't remember for some reason. And then at the end as well, they all get turned back, but it's so many years later. Like, isn't there any massive age differences between these people now?
Perhaps they're just trying to turn up that classic Disney mild peril to 11. But they keep inventing all these bullshit fixes that actually make everything worse. In the original Beauty and the Beast, I just thought, there's some sort of like everyone's frozen in time thing. It doesn't really have to be explained. It doesn't really matter.
No.
The big problem that in the live action remake is that when the Beast lets Belle go, that is a fucking awful thing to do because he's condemning, like, he even says that, I'm sorry I couldn't do the same for you. And it's like, you've condemned all your 100 staff members to death because you've let this girl go. And it also creates a really creepy vibe with the household objects because I know when Belle tries to escape in the remake, the objects are actively trying to stop her from leaving. And it's like, you've made all these characters kind of like dicks at the same time.
Yeah, they're kind of complicit now in the kidnapping.
They've turned them into like really creepy objects when they were really endearing in the original. So I'm just laughing because I'm just thinking, well, imagine if he had like a dildo in his mansion or something, and there was one of those just wobbling around.
Porcelain, right, like a proper wobbly one as well. I was thinking like a porcelain dildo with like Emma Thompson's voice.
No, Judi Dench or something.
Hello, Master Beast. Have you come to slip me inside you? It's because it's going to be Northern as well.
Oh yeah,
it's gonna be Bernard Manning. All right, Master Beast, are you gonna slip me inside you again, eh?
I can't wait to be human again. And the other thing as well, like we were talking about before, with the additions to fix things or right certain wrongs. I know, like the big one in Aladdin is that Jasmine is not empowered enough, and also she's the only female speaking part. So in the remake, they add her like handmaiden that's supposed to be progressive, but in actual fact, all she's there for is to give Will Smith's genie a case of the not gays.
Yeah.
Like, that's all she's there for. Just because we were questioning Robin Williams' genie's sexuality at the end of the original film. And also, I was thinking, like, with the genie in the remake, his deal is nowhere near as good as Robin Williams, because when Robin Williams is free, he still has all these cool powers, whereas when Will Smith is made a non-genie, he just becomes a human.
Yeah.
You've become Will Smith.
I know, yeah. Like, in the original, he puts on a goofy hat and fucking flies off into the cosmos. And in this one, it's like he gets to ride a peasant boat for the remainder of his street rat life.
Oh, I just remembered that. Yeah, it starts with him telling the story, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, oh God, I completely forgot about. Well, he gets a shit deal. Wow. No, all the cosmic wonder gone. Itty bitty living space on the water.
This week I've been watching a lot of interviews with the some of the original directors and animators behind the films, and I was watching an interview with Ron Clements, who's one of the directors of Aladdin, and he was basically saying that with the original framing device of having Robin Williams play the street salesman at the beginning, originally that was supposed to turn out to be the genie.
Yeah, I've saw the script pages. You can see it's scripted as such.
And they decided to leave that out and leave it more ambiguous because they didn't think it mattered. And the only reason they wanted Robin Williams there is because he didn't appear until about 35, 40 minutes into the rest of the film. They wanted to sort of have a bit of Robin Williams at the start and help set up the story. And that's one of the reasons also why Gilbert Gottfried is in the movie as Iago, because Robin Williams is absent for a good portion of the start of the movie. They wanted somebody else to sort of fill that void.
And bring that energy to the film.
Yeah. And this is another thing that the live-action remakes did horribly. What the fuck is going on with Iago in the film? Like, he's gone.
He was missing for me.
Why did they even cast Alan Tudyk? They could have cast anybody.
I could have done it.
I still say it now. Like, we've just got new kittens, and when one of them is meowing too much, I still just look at them and just go, "Calm yourself, Iago."
All the time. I say it to my daughter. Calm yourself, Iago.
But I think that's where these films are going to have an incredibly short lifespan, because there's nothing to take home from any of these films. If you think about all the Renaissance animated films, they've got so many iconic characters and moments and bits of dialogue and everything that you can take with you and you can use them in everyday life like we've just done now. There's nothing in these new films that you can do that with.
For me, it's the soul. It's like, that's kind of what it's lacking. Mm-hmm. You can have a pretty shell, but there's not the emotional connection within. And it can look good, and there can be elements that's good, but whether it connects with you and makes you feel things in the same way, it's just not there. And I don't think it's purely down to it being a nostalgic barrier hindering it. I think it's down to the fact that they're just hollow.
Yeah. I agree as well. I said it earlier on in the episode, but I feel like they're technical exercises that are just missing an emotional core. And one of the things I actually thought of was Disney's always been the company that's regarded as making Happy Meal cinema. And even back in the 90s, when you look at the Disney Renaissance that we all refer to, it's like it's still Happy Meal cinema. It's still very like optimistic, blockbustery driven, good feeling type of easily digestible films. But there's been a lot of talent and a lot of work and a lot of sweat and blood put into making those films as well. That I feel like these films now, it's like getting a Happy Meal, but somebody's already chewed the burger. That's what it feels like to me.
It feels like getting a Happy Meal, but someone's taken the toy.
Oh my god! Oh, my heart! I felt
and shat in your burger.
And also, Ronald McDonald jizzed on your fries.
It's a special sauce.
Oh. Salty and sweet.
I don't want a Happy Meal anymore. I was going to get a McDonald's. So as we're talking as well, I want to move the conversation beyond the Lion King and Aladdin and, you know, the films that we've seen that have been related to the Disney Renaissance. To be honest, I'm not going too far. I'm actually going to be looking to the future. So the next film's up really in this trend, this ongoing trend. As I mentioned, we have the Mulan remake that was supposed to have already been out by now. I don't know, Hercules is going to be announced soon. Did you mention there's another one? I couldn't remember.
Hercules, definitely. If they don't think musical, it's just not going to work. If they're not feeling that sort of Motowny kind of jazzy kind of feel to it, it's just going to flop. Absolutely flop.
I think that one's actually, I mean, it's a really hard one to do because that has such a distinctive visual style that's imprinted on that movie because of the Gerald Scarfe production design. I mean, they've got nowhere to go with that. This is where I kind of feel like, talking about like the technical aspect of it, and I actually have to say, I think all these films, these remakes, are actually technically inferior to the animated films because the medium they've chose to tell these stories is not the right medium.
Oh, I mean, I agree with that, but I think that, for example, when we look at the integrity of the CGI, it's like watching a Transformers film. It's like when I see Transformers and I look at the quality of the CGI on display, I'm like, you know what? Fantastic job, ILM. You really polished the fuck out of this turd. And that's what I feel like with these films. It's like you look at the integrity of the CGI in The Lion King, it's fantastic, but there's no way, shape or form that film should ever be this medium, that should ever be done in that way, because it's so flat, dull and lifeless.
I watched a couple of scenes in preparation for this podcast of The Lion King again. And I was just checking out for seeing if they had like a cat-style butthole animation in there.
I did look for the balls as well.
They hide it well. There's a lot of shots where it's like, if you move a little bit more, you're going to see butt.
Yeah.
But they don't, or the tail's down or whatever. Not that I'm actively looking for lions' arseholes or anything. But, well, I was actually, yeah, I was.
I know you've just got cats. I might call the RSPCA immediately following this podcast. I have a friend. Can I leave an anonymous tip by any chance? But yeah, I wanted to speak about Mulan, because did anybody see the trailers to that film as well?
Yeah.
Like in terms of the way that they're moving with that. Because I know that when that first trailer came out, a lot of people they balked at the idea of it not including Mushu, and it actually... Mulan's not my favourite film of that era anyway, but I'm not that bothered about what they're doing with that film. It looks more like they're trying to make it in the same vein as like Hero or Crouching Tiger or that type of thing, rather than trying to just repeat the original. And I actually think that's probably the best way to go about it. But I actually think that they should have gone the full step further, rather than it being like in between ideas. They just make it its own original story that doesn't have to have this, like, it's got that musical motif as well that makes you think that it's going to include that. I forgot what it's called, that big musical number. It's Christina Aguilera, wasn't it, in the
Reflection, yeah.
Was it Christina Aguilera that did the...
Yeah, she did the one at the end, yeah.
Oh, as if you're asking, as if you don't know.
But yes, Mulan itself is based on pre-existing material anyway, so why not go back to the source and see if there's a new story to tell in that? And I think that the trailer, it does show that it's got an element of that, but it's also kind of tying itself back to the original at the same time.
It seems to me like they're... potentially, they've actively looked at what things might not translate well to live action. A talking dragon. Yeah, that won't. And therefore, perhaps removed it, and maybe that song is used just as a melodic callback to the original, and that's about it, perhaps. But it certainly looks like it's headed in a better direction for the live action remakes.
Yeah. I look at these films like Alice in Wonderland and Dumbo and Maleficent, and then even like Aladdin and The Lion King, and even The Lion King, despite its kind of like planet Earth realism, because you've got these actual talking animals in it as well. It's really jarring, that kind of difference in tones. But even looking at the rest of them, like the actual truly live action ones, is that they all feel so fake and all look so fake. And when I saw the Mulan trailer, I was like, oh wow, at least it seems to be a lot of physical effects. I know there's a lot of naff surrounding like sorcery and that type of thing, which, why not? But it does actually seem to be largely practical, big sets in real locations. And it's like, yeah, okay. I quite like the idea of doing it that way, rather than this kind of soundstagey look of Aladdin that feels like it's actually hindered that film rather than actually benefited it in any way. Because Aladdin reminds me of like a Revenge of the Sith in many ways, where it's like you've got to deliver all of this dialogue on this 1 meter long bit of blue screen.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like Mulan actually feels like, in many ways, like one of these. I was thinking like that John Woo film, Red Cliff. Like it feels like that, like one of those really big kind of Chinese epics, It's not a film I'm particularly looking forward to. It's not a film I'm particularly pumped to see. But I felt when I saw the trailer that I was like, oh, maybe it is a step in the right direction to do these films, to actually just go back to the source material and do a completely different take on it. But yeah, I do worry that the success of more like Aladdin and The Lion King and stuff like that is going to result in this basic retelling that's I'm not interested in whatsoever. I would say to you as well, just to put the question out there, are there any Disney films, even from the Renaissance period, are there any Disney films that you think could benefit from being retold? Because initially I thought not, but I know that me and you, Andy, we had a conversation the other day, and it suddenly popped into my head something that I thought, I think you could retell it and improve on the original. But I don't know if live action's the way particularly, but I think Treasure Planet would be my one, in that Treasure Planet's a very much an almost movie. I like it. but it's almost something else. It's clearly a labour of love, but it never quite achieves the greatness that, given the people involved and the talent involved, that you would expect of those people. And I think it's got some great ideas. It's based on very solid source material that I love anyway, because I read Treasure Island when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot that you can do with that aspect of taking that story and telling it against the framing of space, and a magical version of space at that, in which ships sail off through the cosmos. And I'm like, I think you can do that and do it better than what they did then. But whether or not they'll do it with the same colour and the same energy and the same vibrancy, I don't know if the way that they're making live action films now, they ever would.
The medium of animation is so freeing when it comes to like world building.
Yeah.
That if they did a shot for shot remake of Treasure Planet, it would be too expensive.
Yeah.
You couldn't do it. But in that medium, it works because they're freed up by being able to move the camera in certain ways and use certain characters and have them interact in certain ways. I mean, that film on its own is a marvel in itself. I mean, if you look at the character of John Silver, where he's a hybrid character where like the organic parts are hand-drawn and the cyborg parts are all computer animated, and they've wonderfully blended
character
them
quirk
together.
as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's character in even the technical aspects of how they made the film. His character shines through there. That's great.
Because the only other one I could think of that would maybe benefit, because I think it's maybe suited for a live action thing because it's kind of inspired by live action movies anyway, is Atlantis: The Lost Empire, because it is very heavily Jules Verne, Indiana Jones influence. But I don't know whether it would just come off looking like a rehash of those kind of things anyway, because the thing that makes Atlantis very special on a visual sense is the production design, because all the character designs are by Mike Mignola of Hellboy fame, so it has a very distinctive visual look that is a huge part of what makes the film appealing. It's all the sums of the parts. You can't just, like, it's like with the Hercules thing, I don't know how that's going to work, because you can have the story, you can have the songs, but without that visual look, it's not going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
So in a way, I would have to say no, there's no film that would benefit from a live action remake, because these films have been purposely designed to work within this medium.
Yeah.
And if you're doing something, then just don't have any callbacks. And that's the issue.
Yeah.
They would never do that, because all these films are for, it's a very sophisticated next generation version of the old theatrical re-release. That's all it is. It's just them thinking, right, so instead of just re-releasing our film in the cinema like they used to do, because obviously before home video, Disney used to do this all the time when they used to re-release films, because it's the only way they could get them back into circulation and have the prestige. Like, there was, for the longest time, a lot of these films were in the vault, and you'd only see them at certain times in a decade.
Yeah.
Even when they're released on home video, they're only ever released for a limited time. And this has all kind of gone out the window recently. But all these remakes are a next generation version of re-releasing your film or releasing your film in 3D. Like, they had a very short fad of doing that, like Titanic in 3D, or, Nightmare Before Christmas in 3D. It's exactly the same thing. And all it is, it's them just re-releasing a property, but with a new lick of paint.
Yeah.
And also that progressive label that they sort of attach to these things. And that's all they are.
In many ways, it is exactly what you've just said. It's just the Disney vault taken to the next level, really.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Especially since Michael Eisner was brought on board, and what he kind of instilled into the company from that point is just he excelled in creating anticipation for existing properties by, as you mentioned, just releasing them in these very strict windows. And then when the home video market actually took off, it kind of killed that whole method of releasing these films for him, because once you had them, they were available. You could watch them whenever you wanted, whereas now it's like, well, if we keep on remaking them, and as I say, I think it's going to become circular. They're going to eventually run out of properties, and it's going to resort in them actually remaking the likes of Alice in Wonderland and that type of thing, going straight back. I can see in the future, in another 10 years' time, we'll definitely have like Red Queen, the movie, being released.
Yeah, I think actually a better comparison, because I genuinely
you don't like my fucking comparison.
No, but I think a better comparison, because you almost mentioned it before, was I think these films are actually damaging Disney's brand in the long term. I would compare them more in terms of the damage that they're doing to the Disney brand. I would say they have more in common with those
direct-to-video sequels that they used to make in the 90s and early 2000s, you know, like Aladdin 2 and 3 and The Lion King 2 and 101 Dalmatians 2, Patch's Adventure and shit like that.
I think Simba's Pride, I think it is, The Lion King 2. I think it's great. He Lives in You is a brilliant song as well, which is actually in the stage show.
Yeah, it's one of the better ones, but some of them are absolute dog shit. Like, if you ever watched Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, it's like just fucking awful.
I saw The Return of Jafar, and that was really bad.
Yeah.
And Lion King 4, Nala's Revenge.
Those direct-to-video sequels were lambasted towards the end. Like, they were doing serious harm to Disney's image, like, especially in the traditional animation forum. And I think that these will eventually do the same thing. I don't think history will be kind to them at all.
Oh, history will forget them.
I was looking at some of these numbers before, because it seemed to me that the only films that did really, really well were the ones that were based off Renaissance films. And any of the ones that are, I'd say, outside of The Jungle Book, because that's like a special case, but all the other ones that they've done have actually not been that successful. And also because they're planning to do sequels to some of these films. I know there's an Aladdin sequel in development.
Yes, there is, yeah.
I don't see how that's going to be successful because people only went to see Aladdin based on their nostalgia for the original film. And it's been proved correct because when they did that Alice sequel, even though Alice in Wonderland made over $1 billion, the sequel absolutely tanked.
Yeah, and it's supposedly, I mean, I've not seen it and I have no reason to see it, and it's supposedly supposed to be the better film of the two. And yet nobody went to go to see it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And Maleficent 2 as well has done the same.
Yeah.
Our age group would make up quite a large demographic of people who are watching them based on the originals and, you know, the classic or the what's the word you keep using? The Renaissance are the ones that we talk about and we love the most and the biggest ones in our hearts, right? So, makes sense.
Yeah.
And we're the people that are taking our kids to them as well. I mean, I obviously speak about this as somebody with 2 kids, but like people of our generation are now taking their kids to go see if they can recapture that same feeling we had. And that's also why I feel really bad about this. I mentioned it in my opening that where we are at in terms of the state of cinema and even just Disney as a whole, talking about the company as a whole, in that we've got to a point in which the meals that we are repackaging for our audiences or for a new audience are these, like I say, it's just something from our past, whereas we grew up with the Disney Renaissance and we grew up with this idea that we were having these new stories put to screen and new ideas, and Disney were making new original films. And now it's all about repackaging what we had, but for our kids.
Yeah.
And for me, I feel bad for my daughter about what she's getting because she's not having the same type of treatment that we had. She's just simply being told to eat the same shit that we ate and is not being given anything new of her own that she can grow up and say, you know, these films came out when I was a kid. These are the films I grew up with. It's just repackaged versions of what we already had. And it makes me feel bad about what my daughter's seeing in cinema in many ways.
Aren't a lot of Disney's films based on fairy tales and folklore and existing properties anyway, right?
Yeah, but they're originally told. They're not direct lifts like...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, like Beauty and the Beast is one of the biggies. Like, the interpretation of Beauty and the Beast that they came up with is basically a completely new property because in fact, that's one of those things where they took something that was actually quite weak. They describe it, the original story is just a series of dinners. It's basically just him inviting her to dinner and her not showing up.
Yeah.
And one day she shows up. And that's all the fucking story is. It's
story of my life.
It's a very simple story, and it's them having to extrapolate that and make something work that actually works as a fully functioning story. When I was growing up, I was massively into Disney. You know, one of my ambitions at the time was to be an animator. Mm-hmm. I looked forward every year to a new Disney film coming out because I knew it would be something completely different. And this was in the time when sequels were not even a thing.
Yeah.
I would just be looking forward to the next thing. I'll be like, oh yeah, they're going to do Hercules next year. That's cool. I'd like to see what they do with that. That's the relationship I had growing up, that anticipation of, oh, what story are they going to do next? Whereas now it's like,
oh, what film are they going to regurgitate?
Yeah.
If this was just completely new interpretations with no ties, the same like with that Mulan one, like why can't they just adapt the fucking poem? They're halfway there anyway with that one.
That's what I was saying with it, yeah.
They could easily cut any ties with the Disney film, with the 98 film. It's all intents and purposes a original film with a couple of callbacks, and those callbacks are so tentative that they may as well not be there. I'd be happier with them doing that than just regurgitating, like The Lion King, for example, like The Circle of Life. It's like Gus Van Sant's Psycho remake. It's a shot-for-shot remake. And all it is, it's just live-action analogues for all the shots. It's already been staged. And that's the thing I really object to. Despite the fact that they're making like much worse versions of any of these stories, the fact that some of it is wholesale ripped from the originals. And it's just incredibly depressing.
Yeah, mate. I really, because, I feel where you're coming from. It is incredibly depressing. I know that one of the things it would probably get criticised for is, and I did mention it in my opening, is that, who better to discuss this topic than 3 30-year-olds? But at the same time, it's like when you even approach it, as mentioned, from the perspective of what are the kid audience getting these days? What are Disney giving to our kids as well? And it's not good, really. It's like,
yeah.
And I would say as well, it's not just the Disney live action movies, but it's in the way that they're dealing with like Lucasfilm as well and that type of thing. It's all about nostalgia. It's all about reserving the same experiences over again. And I feel like that's something that audiences will get tired of rather quickly. And I think the more that they release these live action films, like, it seems to have culminated, like hit a peak with 2019, with 4 of them being released the same year, 5 if you include Lady and the Tramp. And I feel like, to be honest, that could be the breaking point for this. I know that all of those films made money, but I can't foresee them continuing to do so. I think the bottom's going to fall out of that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the thing is, like you were talking about with your daughter watching The Lion King, the live action one, and not getting anything out of it. That Circle of Life opening is a prescient point because I would decided to watch those 3, the Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin and Lion King. I purposely watched the originals beforehand and then watched the remakes. And when we were watching Lion King, and I hadn't seen Lion King for quite some time, probably about 5 years since I've actually seen it properly. Mm-hmm. And watching the Circle of Life, the opening, gave me goosebumps. There's that old cliche of like lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
And when we watched the live action, which is identical, pretty much identical shot for shot, that opening, and we weren't getting the goosebumps. And it's like, what's wrong with this? It's not giving me any feeling whatsoever, but it's exactly the fucking same.
Yeah.
And there's something wrong here.
Rescuers Down Under does that for me.
That opening.
That
fucking
scene,
amazing.
Oh my, that is amazing.
But there's that something that these live action remakes are just not getting at all.
Yeah.
You can't recreate that kind of magic.
Even my cats didn't watch even a bit. Like Simba was on screen and like they did not give a shit.
There's not enough visible cat butthole.
No.
That's it.
That was the reason.
That's what cats want from that experience.
Yeah. There was a bit, actually, it was funny. I was wondering how they were going to do it in terms of get these live action animals to emote. And any close up doesn't work because they can't. Because, a tiger can't smile. Even if it's just killed a gazette and it stood over it, nothing is going on. There's just nothing going on there, dead on the inside, right? But they can manipulate it a bit with the bodies. Like when it jumps around and it's excited like a cat or a dog or something would. They can sort of do it that way, but wow, no. When Pumbaa's sad, that does not translate to me.
No.
I remember when the trailer for Warhorse came out. And you had the same criticism then when we saw the trailer. You're like, I just don't get it. It's a horse. It can't emote. And there's a scene at the end when it looks into the camera and you're supposed to get the horrors of war. But you're like, it's just a fucking horse staring at the camera blankly.
No, you know what? Yeah, exactly. All I saw was the animated out reflection of the camera into the horse's black soulless eye.
Like a doll's eye.
That horse doesn't go, you don't know the things I've seen. Because it's a horse. Oh, God. Fucking hooves and horses and bullshit.
Sorry, we've got to stop horsing around.
They can only remake these so many times, like in this time period anyway. And I was thinking, there's a big film that we've not mentioned at all in this, which is
Tim Burton's Dumbo, which actually managed to flop.
Yes.
Flop like oversized ears.
Hey, it's a real pun then, and I don't think you realised it. It managed to flop.
But apparently that film needed to have made 500 million to break even, and it only made 353.
Yeah. I did mention earlier on that I watched some of it. It's like misery porn. Honestly, there's nothing enjoyable about it. It's like
it sounded depressing.
Well, that's it. Everybody's just depressed. It's not enjoyable. It's not happy, and it's really hypocritical as well because it's got this kind of like streak of anti-Disney sentiment all the way through it as well. About at one point, I turned it off when we got to this point, but they go to like this Wonderland circus that is very much an analog for Disney World itself. But the whole film is just like misery-inducing. And nobody's enjoying themselves. And then when Dumbo's born as well, there's no sense of wonder or awe or anything like that. Everybody's just like, oh, look how ugly this elephant is. And because I know that's in the original as well, but because it's not real, because it looks fake as fuck. But yeah, it just is miserable throughout.
How do they handle the crows and the pink elephants?
They're not included.
There's no mouse either.
Oh, what?
There's a reference to all of those things. There's a reference to a crow's feather at one point where Dumbo, he sneezes on a crow's feather, which makes him fly, and that's how they figure out he can fly. And then there's also the daughter trains. She wants to be a scientist, and she runs experiments, and she trains mice, and one of them wears the same costume, and that's it. It's like, I'm not saying that it needs to include all these things to do it. Like, in my opinion, if you're going to do this story, do it completely differently. But there's no way that you should make it that dull and lifeless and lacking of energy or any of the fun and wonder. Okay, so I think we've gone over the main points, but are we optimistic about the future of Disney? What would you say? I'll go to you, Aidan, first. What do you feel about the future of Disney? Is there any films you're looking forward to, or do you feel enthused by it, or are you kind of depressed like the rest of us?
You know, I feel like Neo in The Matrix, where Morpheus shows him on that TV what the outside world really looks like, and it's clouded over, and the robots reign supreme and human beings are grown. Now, not as specific as that, but certainly in that there's no hope.
Oh, nice.
It's a shame, really. I mean, they've not shown that they can do anything in a different way or do it, or that there's any point to redoing it. I think that's the core thing I'm taking away from this conversation, and what I certainly take away from watching the films. And it's a shame because I wish they could sort of pull a hat. I wish they could pull a rabbit out of a hat.
A hat out of a
but
rabbit.
I just don't.
Fucking hell, RSPCA, hello.
I would pay. I would pay to watch
again.
That. No, but I mean, they've not shown that they're able to handle these remakes in a way that makes them worthwhile. So no, no, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of something positive, but it's just not coming. No, I don't think so. I'm not looking forward to the future ones because I'm a man of science, not a man of faith, and what they've done so far hasn't worked. Therefore, I don't think it's going to work.
And Andy, how do you feel? I mean, considering how positive that you've been throughout the episode, I imagine you cannot wait to see the next that Disney has to offer.
As I said maybe at the start of the show, I think the only departments in Disney at the moment that are taking any kind of creative risks are the animation departments, because they are the only ones are I mean, you know, bar a few sequels, every single film that they are releasing at the moment, Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios combined, they're all new stories. Yeah. You know, if you just look at the concept of the Soul movie that's coming out, that's bonkers.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
In any medium, that's a really strange idea, and I love it.
I read about that separate from the trailer. When I saw the trailer, it made me think one thing, but then I actually started reading up about the film and what it's truly about, and in terms of the different ideas of afterlife and pre-life as well. And I thought, wow, it's really original. It's a crazy idea. I can't wait to see what they do with it.
And it makes me happy as well, the fact that that's a Pete Docter film. So Pete Docter's, you know, Monsters Incorporated, Up, Inside Out. And the fact that he's now in charge of Pixar as well. Yeah. Like, he's the big dude now. Now John Lasseter's fucked off or been let go.
Yeah, I think he's been quietly let go.
Yeah.
He's been peeled off. And please, stop hugging me, sir.
But the fact that he's now in charge is really exciting because he's always been one of the best directors that Pixar has to offer. I just think the whole direction that area of Disney's going in is quite positive, but everything else is just fucking creatively bankrupt. Yeah. I mean, it's just a mess.
and it's doing well for them now.
That's it, yeah. With Dumbo being the last of that lot, that's what I mean. I feel like the bottom may be starting to fall out of this idea, and I hope it truly is, because this sense of cannibalization that they're going down, this road of just simply regurgitating the same ideas and going through those motions, it's, as you mentioned, it's only short term. It's only going to yield for the short term, and it's long term. It could actually impact the long-lasting legacies of the original films, and that's where I think that this could really go wrong for Disney, because it's already kind of sullying what Disney represent as a company anyway. So I feel like, and I hope that we are coming towards the end of this trend, like the end is in sight, but God, who knows? Who knows if it truly is, because you're only one single $1 billion film away from a bunch of execs greenlighting about 4 different versions of that exact same film.
Yeah.
Because that's where we're at as an industry as well.
Disney's bank manager knows where it's at.
But it also seems to me as well, with the advent of Disney Plus, if you look at the films in development, a lot of the films that are based on, I wouldn't say lesser known, but like for example, there's a Robin Hood remake in development.
That's it for Disney Plus.
But that is for Disney Plus. So I feel like some of these films are going to be a bit sheltered by being on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
But it does mean that after a certain amount of time, the amount of properties that they're going to be able to remake is going to start to dry up.
Certainly.
So that's the only positive I can garner out of this, because these are specifically live action remakes, and the fact that the ones that have done really well are only the ones that have been based on the Renaissance films, of which there are not that many Renaissance films, and actually they've done some of the most successful ones already. There's a Hunchback one in development, but I mean, even though I love Hunchback the film, it was never that successful at the cinema. Same goes for Hercules. Hercules was quite a big bomb at the time.
I mean, are we going to get another Tarzan as well?
You bet, yeah.
That'll be swinging into cinemas in 2023.
But yeah, it will be interesting to see how long the lifespan of this is going to be, like, and whether, say, the Aladdin sequel, whether that's going to soar or just be like Alice Through the Looking Glass.
Yeah. You know what? I think you're absolutely right, actually. Come to think about it, I think that's where the trend is going to be made or broken, is because there is a finite amount of these remakes that they can make. It's all going to be in how the spin-offs of these ideas perform, and we've already seen in the past, looking at Through the Looking Glass and Maleficent 2, that not well so far. Hopefully, I mean, and I say this truly, hopefully that trend continues. If they continue down this trend of making these creatively bankrupt films, I'm not strictly opposed to the idea of there being live action remakes. I'm just opposed to the idea of them being so creatively bankrupt. That's what I was trying to get across. But yeah, so I think we've summed up there really our thoughts on the episode. I will say thank you very much, Aidan, for joining us on this episode. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast once more, and hopefully we won't leave it 4 years to have you back on again.
My pleasure, guys. Brilliant topic that we're all really stoked and happy about to be talking about. Yeah.
And so that's been Popcorn Digest for this week's episode. Next week, if you join us again, we'll be reviewing, I do believe it is Tremors. Is that correct, Andy?
I think so.
Yeah, I looked at the list.
I will just check. I think
Thank
it
you.
is. Oh, just as an aside, I came up with alternative titles for the films that I saw. So 2019 Aladdin is called Will Smith and the Magic Jams.
That's great.
2017 Beauty and the Beast is called Beauty and the Prick. Because the Beast is an absolute arsehole in that film. He has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And 2019 Lion King is called I Just Can't Wait to Emote. But yeah, it's Tremors.
Yeah. Okay, so join us next week when Andy and I will be returning to review everybody's favourite graboid-related movie, Tremors. But until then, it's bye from myself, bye from Andy.
Bye.
And also ta-ra from Aidan.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening.
Clear the way in the old bazaar. Hey you, let us through. It's a brand new start. Oh, come be the first on your block to meet his eye. Make way, here he comes. Ring bells, bang the drums. You're gonna love this guy. Prince Ali, fabulous he, Ali Ababa. Show some respect, boy, genuflect down on one knee.
Now try your best to stay calm. brush up your Sunday salon, and come and meet his spectacular coterie. Prince Ali, mighty is he, Ali Ababa, strong as 10 regular men, definitely.
He faced the galloping hordes,
100 bad guys with swords.
Who sent those goons to their lords? Why, Prince Ali!
Little town, it's a quiet village. Every day, like the one before.
Little town full of little people waking up to say.
So prepare for the coup of the century. Prepare for the murkiest scam.
Meticulous planning to